Okay, in the last video, I had just made this shape for his muzzle. And I squared it off a little bit there. I'm going to Control T and square it off a little bit on the other side as well. Kind of flattening it. And making it kind of push into the nose. You can always set the nose on top of it. Like so. Okay, now I'm going to duplicate that, Command J, and I'm going to Control T and flip horizontally that duplicate, and then move it over to the other side. Nest it right in there. Use my arrow keys. So about there. Now, I want to make sure that they are sunk below the nose. So I'm going to use Command left bracket to move them down through the layers until they're underneath the nose, but on top of the eyes. So it's, again, like a stack of paper. Lots of stacks of paper. And now this is what I have of my own vector shapes. And that's going to allow me to make some teeth underneath. But I also want a lower jaw. So I think I'm going to do that underneath them and build a new oval that is the lower jaw. Like so. I'll make that a little bit lighter. Now what makes Bucky Bucky are the teeth. So now I'm going to use the triangle tool, but there is no triangle. Instead there's what's called the parametric shape. So you click on the parametric shape. This is for any sided, straight-sided shape, two-dimensional shape. And I'm going to change the sides to 3. And then I'm going to build these lower teeth. And I need to fill them with white. And right now they're underneath the maw on top. So then I use Command right bracket to move them up on top. I can use the move tool to move it onto that lower jaw, like so. But I can also hit Control T and transform them a little bit, let them distort with Shift. I can even warp them so they have a slightly curved bottom, so it feels like they're coming off of a jaw. Okay. And then, same thing, lots of repetition, duplicate it, Control T, flip it horizontally, move it to the other side. And maybe I want to bring them both a little bit closer to the middle, because they look pretty close right there. Okay, then I need teeth on the other sides as well. So I'm going to now do something that's a little different that we haven't done before. I made those 2 white teeth. Let's find them. And I'm going to hold down Command and Shift so that they're both selected. And if they're both selected, highlighting them with Command and Shift, then I can duplicate them together. Command J will make a copy of each of them, and then when I move them, they will move together. And when I transform them with Control T, they will transform together. It's a nice way of getting some symmetry. And then I want to tuck those maybe, let's see what makes sense. Tilt them a little bit more, right there. Okay, then I'm going to duplicate both of those again, and then Control T, and then flip horizontal, and then move over. And what makes him bucktooth, is that one of these is going to be a lot longer and one of these is going to be shorter, which is nice because I can separate them and then individually adjust them. Like hold down Shift and stretch this out and warp its edge so it comes down at a more natural, kind of flatter pace. And then I want to make this one kind of small. So Control T and hold down Shift and kind of flatten it out. Move it into place. And maybe warp it as well. All right. I'm just going to warp this one a little bit more so it's not angled. So it still angles in a tiny bit. Not too much distortion. There we go. All right, so now we've got Bucky's buck teeth. From this, it looks like I want to take both of these and make them a little bit smaller. So I can hold down Shift and select them both and then transform them both together. Maybe hold down Shift and just flatten them a little bit. Like so. Okay, what else can I do? There's a little horseshoe that's pink above his nose. Horseshoes can be really tricky. So let's look at different ways I can do that. I can use an ellipse. Let's put this on the top. I'm going to make it pink. Now he looks like kind of a cat deity. I'm going to do Control T and warp. Take the bottom and just push it in on itself. It's kind of like twisting the wireframe in on itself. And it's not something I usually like to do because it can get really confusing how to move it back from this. But if you know you want to kind of double something over, once you hit return, it's just a shape again that you can work with. And I can move that down a little bit. All right, and I think I'm going to make the ears bigger. But I'm going to do what I showed you and hold down Shift and select them together. Come on. So if I hit Control T now, it's going to make both of these ears bigger together. There we go. And then the one I just didn't select was this one. So let me Control T that and make it bigger. There we go. So being able to select multiples to edit is very helpful. I'm going to play with the shape of this one a little bit more before I do some of the finishing details. I'm going to warp it. Remember, you can always revisit. And I'm just going to warp it in and out a little like that. And that necessitates extending this a little bit. Oops. You can always do Command Z. There we go. All right, I think I need a little bit more darkness in here, so I'm just going to make little ellipse that sits on top. Move it on top of the others. In a nice dark shape. Then I will distort it down. And then move it behind the teeth. Now just some of the detailing work. He's got these little white flecks. So lots of duplication. Fill it with white. And then Command J, just use the move tool in Command J. I can move these where I want them. Command J. I'm not going to try to make them too symmetrical, side to side. In fact, I'll show you how I can alter them all at once. So that's kind of the pattern of them. Now I select all of them by holding down Shift. How many are there? 5. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And then Control T, and now I can rotate them all together, hold down Shift and distort them all together, right click, and I can't warp, but I can distort, which gives it a little bit of variation that I like. If I like that, then I can take all of them and I can say Command J, that duplicates them all, Control T, flip horizontal, and move them over. And then he's got this kind of wiry hair at the top of his head. I'm going to take this same color. In fact, I might even darken that color just a tiny bit. Not too dark. And then make sure that's on, or that these are behind it. And then make sure that these, well, let's see. There we go. Yeah, so everything's kind of layered correctly. And now I'm going to add some of that wiriness behind his head so I can build it up on top of the ears. So just so I can show it to you, instead of using a rectangle and an ellipse, we're not using the line, or a parametric shape, I could go to the custom shape tool. And the custom shape tools you'll see here, they're a bunch of just very helpful, in fact more helpful than the default ones in Photoshop, of vector shapes. And sometimes I can use those and modify them in nice ways. So if I want just kind of random hairs spurting out, in Photoshop there's a grass tool that looks a lot like that. Maybe I use that. I can use the moon. But I want it to be an emoji. Maybe I'll use the cell tower bars. And then when I draw it, there I have cell tower bars at that shape. And now if I do Control T, I can warp them. So it's kind of just a shortcut to get shapes to work with. And it's a little bit more uniform like emojis often are, instead of just truly random little lines coming out. And then I got to move them up and out. And warp this top one down. It's too strong. We're not using clipping masks. We're not using anything fancy. We're